It feels like every day there's a new headline about AI, right? Like the advancements are coming so fast, it's kind of hard to even keep up.
Yeah, it really is remarkable, isn't it? But all this progress also comes with, well, some pretty significant ethical questions.
Right, exactly. Like how do we make sure AI is used responsibly? And one of the big things you hear a lot about is AI being a black box. We can see what goes in, we see the results that come out,
Mm-hmm.
but the actual process is happening inside, especially when ethical issues come up. It can feel totally opaque, like impenetrable.
And that's a pretty unsettling feeling, I think, for a lot of people. It's like, how can we trust something if we don't even know how it works?
Exactly, and that's where today's deep dive comes in. We're going to be looking at a fascinating master's thesis from the University of Porto in Portugal. It's titled, and get ready for this, O Diálogo como Produto, a Liminaridade da Inteligência Artificial Conversational.
Catchy, right?
Yeah, very succinct. The author is Leandro Ortolan, and he was guided by Professor Maria João Couto and Professor Domingos José Matos Susaforia.
A great team. And this dissertation really takes a direct approach to this whole black box dilemma in AI.
And for you, the learner, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. We're going to explore how this dissertation actually lays the groundwork for a whole new wave of research in AI, specifically aimed at tackling these, really challenging ethical issues that keep cropping up.
Yeah, it's not just theory. It's about how we actually move forward in a responsible way.
Right. So we'll look at the argument against this idea of AI as a black box. We're going to delve into a pretty fascinating proposal for using something called a meta-ontology. That's metaontology, to basically allow AI to interpret data semantically. And the hope is this could lead to, well, some much more effective ways to address ethical concerns.
It's about giving AI meaning, not just data.
Exactly. And as always, we'll do this in a way that's clear, that's engaging, hopefully even fun. Moments without the headache. Exactly. So no need to be a philosophy expert to follow along.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in, shall we? The dissertation really makes this central argument, this core idea, that a meta-ontology...
Okay, gotta be honest. Meta-ontology kind of sounds intimidating.
It does, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
one of those words, but it's really not as complicated as it sounds.
Yeah.
The basic idea is that a well-structured meta-ontology is absolutely essential if we want to push AI research further, and critically, if we want to actually address these ethical dilemmas we keep bumping into.
Okay, so it's not just some abstract philosophical concept. It's got real-world implications for how we develop AI and how we make sure it's ethical.
Right. It's about the foundation we build AI on. And one of the dissertation's most interesting points, I think, is that this whole black box concept, it might actually be a misunderstanding, like a fundamental one.
Wait, really? So you're saying it's not that AI is inherently opaque, it's something else?
That's exactly what the dissertation argues. It says the real problem isn't this, mysterious inner workings of the AI that we can't comprehend. It's actually a lack of robust mechanisms for how we classify and interpret data semantically.
Okay, break that down for me a bit. What does it mean to classify and interpret data semantically?
It means essentially understanding meaning. It's not just about processing data as raw information, but understanding the context, the nuances, the why behind the data.
Okay, so it's like if I just read a list of words, I might get the basic idea, but I'm missing the story, the deeper meaning behind the words.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And the dissertation argues that if AI can only process data at that surface level without grasping the meaning, well, it's going to be really difficult, maybe even impossible, to expect it to make truly ethical judgments.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like you can't follow the rules if you don't even understand what the rules are for.
Right. So the dissertation proposes this pretty radical solution. What if we equip the data itself with a meta-ontology, like bake meaning right into the raw data itself?
Okay, so this meta-ontology thing, it's like a framework for understanding the data, for giving it context.
Exactly. It's like an interpretive lens for the AI, allowing it to move beyond just recognizing patterns to actually understanding the semantics, the meaning, the story behind the data.
So instead of just seeing data points, it's like the AI can start to see the connections, the relationships, the narrative.
Right. And the dissertation argues that this deeper level of understanding is going to naturally lead to more nuanced, more ethically informed outputs from the AI.
So it's not just about making AI smarter, it's about making it ethically aware.
Exactly. And that's where we start to see the potential for this to really address the ethical problems we're grappling with. It's about shifting from seeing data as just information to understanding it as knowledge that's embedded within a web of meaning.
And that's what makes this dissertation so, so original, so potentially groundbreaking. It's not just philosophy, it's got practical applications.
Absolutely. And the dissertation is very clear that it wants to move beyond just like theoretical discussions in philosophy. It wants to offer real, tangible applications, particularly in the field of information science and specifically conversational AI.
Okay, so we're getting into the specifics now. Conversational AI, why that focus?
Well, the author actually makes a deliberate distinction between conversational AI and the term you hear a lot, generative AI.
Interesting. So what's the difference?
The dissertation argues that generative AI is really more of a technical term. It focuses on how the AI produces language, but it doesn't necessarily imply any deeper understanding or intentionality.
Okay.
Conversational AI, on the other hand, builds on those generative abilities, but it adds this crucial layer of intentionality, meaning the AI is not just producing words, it's engaging in a dialogue with a purpose. It's trying to understand the user, the context, the goals of the conversation.
So it's not just about saying things, it's about saying things with the reason, with an understanding of the bigger picture.
Exactly. And that shift, that focus on intentionality is what the dissertation sees as essential for building AI that can truly interact with humans in a meaningful, ethical way.
It's not just mimicking conversation, it's participating in it.
Right. And this dissertation is really interesting because it also tries to bridge this gap that often exists between like the philosophers thinking about these big ideas and the people actually developing the AI technology.
Yeah, it feels like those two worlds don't always talk to each other.
Right. And this dissertation wants to change that. It uses this approach called supplementation informational, which basically means using really detailed notes and explanations to kind of create a common language, a shared understanding between philosophy and information science.
So it's like building a bridge between these two worlds so they can actually work together to create better, more ethical AI.
Exactly. And it's this interdisciplinary approach that I think makes the dissertation so innovative. It's not just staying in one lane, it's trying to connect different ways of thinking.
Okay, so let's get back to this meta-ontology concept. The dissertation seems to be drawing on some pretty classic philosophical ideas to explain it. It mentions Leibniz, for example.
Right. It goes back to some of the fundamental questions in philosophy. What is reality? What exists? And how do we know?
Big questions.
Huge questions. And the dissertation follows a Leibnizian line of reasoning, which essentially says that everything we understand about reality, our entire ontology, can be traced back to these fundamental presuppositions, these assumptions we make about the nature of existence.
Okay, so these presuppositions, they're like the underlying code of reality.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
And the dissertation argues that these meta-ontological presuppositions aren't just about defining data, they're about giving it meaning, explaining its nature.
Okay, so we're not just talking about what data is, we're talking about what it means.
Exactly. And the core belief here is that this approach, grounding everything in these fundamental presuppositions, can actually help us overcome some of the big technical challenges we're facing with AI.
Like what?
Well, one of the biggest challenges right now is that we don't have really robust theories for how different pieces of data actually relate to each other. We've got mountains of data, but without a solid way to understand the connections, the relationships, it's like having a million puzzle pieces, but no picture to guide us.
So it's not just about having data, it's about understanding how it all fits together, how it creates meaning.
Right. And that's where the dissertation emphasizes this idea of a relational ontology. It's about shifting our focus from seeing data as these isolated individual things to understanding the complex web of relationships between them.
Okay, so instead of seeing data points, we're seeing a network, a system of interconnected ideas.
Exactly. And it's not just the data itself. It's also about the relationships between the data, the algorithms that process it, and the users who are interacting with these AI systems.
So it's a much more holistic, interconnected view.
Exactly. It's recognizing that AI doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's embedded within this complex ecosystem of relationships.
The outline also mentions metadata. Where does that fit into this whole relational view?
That's a really important point. The dissertation actually elevates the role of metadata, seeing it as more than just like supplementary information. It sees metadata as a crucial source of the layers of meaning that help us understand these relationships.
Okay, so instead of metadata being just an afterthought, it's actually fundamental to understanding how data connects.
Right. Think of metadata as providing the context, the background information, the who, what, when, where, why of the data. It's what allows us to really grasp the significance of a piece of data within the larger picture.
So it's like metadata is the glue that holds the whole story together.
That's a great analogy. It gives us the framework for understanding how different pieces of data relate to each other, how they fit into a narrative.
The outline also mentions a concept called prehension from the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead. What's the significance of that here?
Right. Prehension in Whitehead's philosophy is essentially about how things experience each other. It's the basic unit of experience.
Okay.
And the dissertation uses this concept to describe data as being fundamentally receptive to qualification, meaning that data isn't just this inert thing, it's something that can be experienced, that can be understood in different ways.
And how does that relate to AI?
Well, the dissertation says that this qualification of data, this experiencing of data, happens through metadata and ontologies. It's like metadata and ontologies provide the framework for the AI to understand and interpret the data, to experience it in a meaningful way.
So it's not just about processing data. It's about the AI actually,
Right.
in a sense, understanding it, experiencing it.
Exactly. And that's a really key point because the dissertation argues that once we start applying this meta-ontological lens to the data, once we start seeing it as interconnected and meaningful, we can start to see how those correlations between data points can form coherent narratives.
So instead of just seeing a random collection of data, the AI can start to see the story, the underlying narrative.
Right. And that's really crucial for moving beyond just basic correlations to generating real, meaningful insights.
And that's where the concept of nexos comes in, right?
Exactly. Nexos, another concept from Whitehead, are essentially these ontological groupings of those prehensions. They're groups of experiences that are characterized by narratives.
Okay, so individual data points connect to form narratives, and then these narratives group together to form nexus.
Right. And these nexos, these interconnected groupings of narratives, they form what the dissertation calls public facts.
Public facts, what does that mean?
It means shared understandings that give meaning to our shared reality, to what we perceive as objectivity. It's like individual data points create narratives, narratives create nexos, and nexos create this shared understanding of the world.
Okay, so it's like this layered process of building meaning from individual data points all the way up to this shared objective reality.
Exactly.
And
That's what the dissertation sees as so crucial for AI. It's about moving beyond just processing data to actually understanding it, making sense of it in a way that reflects our shared understanding of the world.
And this all ties back to the critique of the black box idea, right?
Absolutely. The dissertation argues that this whole notion of AI being this impenetrable, mysterious black box is a distraction. It says that the real problem isn't that we can't understand AI, it's that we're looking in the wrong place.
Okay, so where should we be looking?
The dissertation says we need to shift our focus from obsessing over the inner workings of isolated algorithms to understanding the relationships between users and these technologies.
Because AI isn't just a bunch of code, it's a tool that humans use, and the way we use it matters.
Exactly. And the dissertation argues that these relationships between users and technology, they need a coherent narrative framework if we want to really understand them.
So it's not about what's happening inside the box, it's about how the box is being used, how it's interacting with the world.
Right. And the dissertation actually cites a philosopher named Freiman who wrote in 2023 about the need for new theoretical frameworks to analyze what technologies are saying.
What technologies are saying? That's an interesting way to put it.
It is, isn't it? It's about moving beyond just seeing technology as a tool and understanding it as something that communicates meaning, that shapes our understanding of the world.
Okay, so it's not just about what AI does, it's about what it means, what it tells us about ourselves and our world.
Exactly. And the dissertation traces this really interesting shift that's happened in philosophy over time. It talks about how the focus has moved away from the individual subject and object, like in the work of Kant, Husserl, Heidegger, Ricoeur.
Big names in philosophy.
Huge names. And the dissertation says that there's been this movement towards focusing on the relationship between the subject and the object, on the hyphen that connects them.
Okay, so it's not just me and the world, it's about the interaction, the relationship between us.
Right. And the dissertation argues that this relational perspective is absolutely crucial for understanding AI because AI is inherently relational. It's all about interaction, dialogue, the exchange of information, and meaning.
So it's not just a static thing, it's constantly evolving, changing based on its interactions.
Exactly. And that's why the dissertation argues against thinking of AI in terms of these fixed, unchanging elements, what it calls Parmenidean elements. It says we need to see AI as a dynamic, evolving narrative that's shaped by these relationships and interactions.
Okay, so we've talked about the critique of the black box. We've talked about this relational ontology and the importance of narrative. How does this meta-ontological approach actually help us address those ethical challenges we talked about at the beginning?
Well, the dissertation actually critiques the traditional kind of static ways of thinking about ethics in AI.
Static.
Yeah, like rule-based systems where you try to program in all the possible ethical scenarios and tell the AI what to do in each case.
Okay.
The dissertation argues that this approach often fails because ethical dilemmas are rarely black and white. They're messy, they're contextual, they depend on the specific situation.
Real life is rarely straightforward.
Exactly. So instead of these rigid rule-based systems, the dissertation proposes a dynamic meta-ontology, one that can actually integrate the different dimensions of the conversational AI user.
Different dimensions, what does that mean?
It means recognizing that the user isn't just a data point. They're a complex being with their own unique perspectives, values, experiences. And the dissertation says that we need to account for all of that if we want to build truly ethical AI.
Okay, so how do we do that?
The dissertation breaks it down into 3 fundamental levels. The first level is objective data, the raw facts and information that the AI processes. This is kind of the baseline level. The second level is intersubjectivity. This is the realm of shared social and cultural norms, values, expectations. It's the stuff that we all kind of agree on as a society.
Like don't steal, be polite, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And then the third level is user subjectivity. This is where things get really interesting because this is about the individual user's unique perspective, their ethical framework, their personal experiences.
So it's not just about what society thinks is right or wrong. It's about what the individual user thinks is right or wrong.
Exactly. And the dissertation argues that this third level, user subjectivity, is absolutely crucial if we want AI to be truly ethical. Because what's ethical for one person might not be ethical for another.
It's about recognizing that there's not always one right answer.
Right. And the dissertation suggests that by mapping subjective data, by understanding the individual user's perspective within this broader framework, the AI can start to grasp the nuances of human individuality, even the unpredictability of human behavior.
So it's about making the AI more human in a sense.
In a way, yes. It's about giving the AI the tools to understand not just data, but people. And the dissertation argues that this deeper understanding can then be used to create more accurate narratives and predictions about user behavior, which can then be used to inform the AI's ethical decision-making.
So it's not just about programming and rules, it's about teaching the AI to understand and respond to the complexity of human values.
Exactly. And by understanding these different dimensions, by seeing the user as a whole person, we can actually start to develop ways to monitor and adjust the AI's ethical behavior in real time.
Okay, so instead of just reacting to ethical problems after they happen, we can actually try to prevent them from happening in the first place.
Right. It's a much more proactive, dynamic approach to AI ethics.
This is really fascinating stuff. The outline also mentions something called Progetto Signo, which I think translates to Project Sign. How does that real-world project illustrate this value-sensitive design approach?
Yes, Progetto Signo is a really interesting example. It was a project focused on developing digital health technologies, and they used a very deliberate, value-sensitive approach to the design process.
So it wasn't just about creating the technology, it was about making sure the technology was aligned with human values.
Exactly. And they did this by bringing together a diverse group of stakeholders, including designers, programmers, philosophers, and doctors.
So they had people from different fields, different perspectives, all working together.
Right. And they used this really interesting methodology of having in-depth discussions and analysis to try to identify the core values that were important in this context.
So they were trying to figure out what are the ethical considerations that are specific to digital health technologies?
Exactly. And one of the key things they did was identify what they called transversal values, meaning values that were shared across all the different stakeholder groups.
So these were values that everyone agreed on, regardless of their background or perspective.
Right. And the dissertation sees this as a huge step forward in responsible design because it shows that it's possible to find common ground, even when you're dealing with complex ethical issues.
So it's like, even though people might disagree on the details, there are certain fundamental values that we can all agree on.
Exactly. And the dissertation points to Progetto Signo as a model for how we should be approaching AI development in general. It's about being intentional, about bringing together diverse perspectives, and about making sure that ethical considerations are baked into the design process from the very beginning.
It's not an afterthought, it's the foundation.
Right. And this dissertation has been really thought-provoking. It's clear that it's making a significant contribution to the field, offering a fresh perspective on how we address these ethical challenges in AI.
Absolutely. And I think the key takeaway for you, the learner, is that this dissertation presents a really compelling argument for moving beyond this simplistic black box view of AI. It's about recognizing that AI is not this mysterious, unknowable thing, but a tool that we create and use, and that we have a responsibility to use it ethically.
And the way to do that, according to the dissertation, is to embrace this idea of a dynamic meta-ontology, a framework for understanding data and users in a way that incorporates meaning, context, and values.
And that's the path towards building AI that's not just intelligent, but wise.
Wise, I like that. And to leave you with something to think about, consider how this ability to semantically understand data, and even more importantly, user intentions, could really change, like fundamentally change, not just AI, but also our understanding of knowledge itself. Like, what does it even mean to know something in a world where AI can process information in such complex ways?
Huge question.
Huge questions. And how does this change our understanding of ethics? Can we even talk about ethics in the same way when we're dealing with machines that can think and learn? And finally, how does this impact the relationship between humans and technology? Are we moving towards a future where AI is a partner, a collaborator, or something else entirely?
Really makes you think.
It does. This dissertation really opens up a whole new way of thinking about AI, and it's an exciting, albeit challenging, future to contemplate.
Absolutely. So for the learner, keep those questions in mind as you continue to explore the world of AI. And as always, keep learning.